Hey there everyone, today we are going to make a Julie and we're going to make it out of this really beautiful brown and white croc. Summer's coming and using white on a bag is great, and I love pairing it with this or having it with this brown because then it's not solid white. We have a layout that we can provide to you to show you exactly how to lay out the pieces on the faux leather. Because in order to get a specific look for this bag, you have to lay out the pattern pieces in a certain way. And, we've already done the work for you. So, basically it shows you each pattern piece and whether it needs to be laid out on the dark section or the light section. Pretty easy to understand and follow. So if you would like to have that layout, just go ahead and visit the website. And I'm sure we have a link below to show you exactly where to get that. So as always, we're going to start out by going over pattern pieces. I'm going to move the camera so you can see them, and then we're going to get to stitching. And this is a live stitch session, so hopefully everything will go great. Let's go over these pattern pieces. So of course we have two handles. I went ahead and did one handle already. We'll do the second handle together. I drew a line down the center. You can see that in blue ink, and then put 1/4 inch double-sided tape on each side of the line. We're going to fold that together and get that handle done. That's going to be one of the first things we do. We have two middle base pieces, and these middle base pieces, when you go to adhere your Decaville light or whatever stabilizer you use, you want to draw a line 1/2 inch from one short edge and then put the stabilizer up against it. It's going to be further away on this edge, and that's by design. So of course you have two of those. You have two middle base pieces, and the middle base piece, you're going to do the same thing. Your stabilizer is really short here. You draw a line 1/2 inch from one of the short edges, put the stabilizer up against it, and that's where you're going to adhere it. Okay? So the stabilizer is just on a very small section of this base piece. Then we have two upper lining pieces, and your upper lining piece has, of course, stabilizer on the back. That's just centered. And then we have our bottom piece, and I went ahead and put the feet on already. The pattern shows 4 feet. I decided I was going to add 2 extra here. And of course, to do that, all you do is you find the center and you go ahead and add the 2 extra. I always like to put some double-sided tape on the back side of my feet. Does 2 things. One, it protects the lining from the metal, and then the second thing is it helps it all hold in place. We also have our slip pocket accent pieces. There are 2 slip pockets in this bag, so we have 2 accent pieces. We have our key fob. We have our actual strap connectors, and I went ahead and made 3 of the 4. All you do is draw a line down the center. I put 1/2 inch double-sided tape on this, and then we're going to peel this off and fold it, and we'll make one together. These are sides, and I know that a lot of people, when you first look at it, you're thinking that's the front and the back, but it's actually the side. It's bigger, obviously, than the front and back pieces. When you put your stabilizer on this, you're going to just center it, and you can see I already have lines drawn here. Now, I give you measurements in the pattern, how far down to come and how far over. And then what we're going to do is cut slits in between these 2 lines, and that's where our strap connectors are going to go. So we're going to do this one together. But on this piece here, you can see I already added my strap connectors. They are hidden strap connectors. I also added a rivet. So you can see how that works there. And then of course in the back, this is what you see. And this is going to, again, be the side piece. So essentially, one of these is going to be on the front, and one of these is going to be on the back. For lining pieces, we have our pocket. This is our exterior pocket lining pieces. All my lining has woven interfacing on the back. We have our zipper pocket pieces. Of course, we have 2 of those, and I just clip my zipper to it so I know which was which. This is going to be our smaller slip pocket that we're going to fold in half and stitch. We have our larger slip pocket. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We have our lining pieces. Okay, and one of the greatest things about this bag is that the lining seams are on the side, but the exterior seams are on the front and the back, so there's no intersecting seams. So it's a really great bag to sew on a domestic machine because there's not a lot of bulk in areas where sometimes there are in other bags. And then the last thing we have here is our zipper placket pieces. So we have 2 of the main pieces, and then of course we have 2 lining pieces, and they are both backed with some woven interfacing. And of course there's no stabilizer on these. So we're going to set most of these pieces aside, and we're going to start with our handle. Get all these things out of the way. And as I mentioned, I already did one handle piece. I really like the way, if you lay this out according to what we show you, it looks like it's striped a little bit, and I really like that. So what we do when we do a handle is remove the backing from the double-sided tape. We're going to go ahead and just fold these long edges in. Now what you want to do, I usually fold it just shy of the line. So you don't want to go right to the line, you want to do it just underneath, so that when we fold the other side, we're going to do exactly the same thing. And what that's going to do is give this handle a little bit of room to fold, and it's just going to help everything lay flatter. Okay? So make sure you don't pull when you fold this handle up. And what I mean by that, a lot of people tend to want to pull and lay this down. You don't want to do that. All you're doing is folding this up, and then you're just going to pat it down. So we're going to go all the way to the other end. Okay, don't run your hand across it. All you're doing is pulling it out of proportion. And you can see here how I am just shy of that line. You can see my blue line, and I'm just underneath that. So we're going to peel the other side off. We can do exactly the same thing. Leave ourselves just a little bit of space. Again, don't pull. And sometimes what I even like to do is put some down, then come to this other end, go ahead and line up my edges here. And then they should all meet in the middle. Okay. So you can see here, I have just a slight little space right in between. So now when I fold this up, I'm going to have space to fold this, and it's going to give that extra tiny little space there, an area for the handle to fold, and it's just going to help keep everything nice and flat. So go ahead and clip this in place. And then we're going to stitch, and as most of you know, I really like to stitch with an edge guide. This keeps everything in line, nice and even. Most days I can stitch a straight line, but you know, I think we all have days where maybe that's not as likely. So go ahead and stick this in, line this up, and we'll stitch. So I'm not going to cut a shape into my edges here, so I'm just going to turn and stitch straight across, and then I'll even it off with scissors. Make sure everything's lined up. And I'm going to do just a little bit of a back stitch. This white thread really blends in nice, and it is going to be perfect. So I am using a size 16 needle here, and I'm using our Fusion, or not Fusion, I'm sorry, our Tex 70 thread in white. Okay, so from here I'm just going to take and clip this off so it's nice and straight. And I really don't even have to edge paint here because the edges are white, and so it blends in really nice. Okay, and then we have our handles completed. Both of them ready to go. Okay, so we're going to set these aside. And the next thing I want to do is my handle connector. So as I said, I already did, three of the four. And to do that, all you're going to do is to pull the backing off the tape. I like to use 1/2" tape when I do my strap connectors. You see I drew a line there. And in this case, I do want my long edges to meet. So I'm going to just do the same thing, fold these up, but fold it right to the line, and then make sure this side connects to it. Okay, so now I have no space there. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch on each side. Stitch on this side. And essentially that's all you really need to do for strap connectors. So we're going to move on by putting our strap connectors onto our front and back, onto our sides. And this is what the end result's going to be. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I went ahead and already marked so that I knew exactly where I'm going to put my slits. So what I typically do is to take a cutting board and a craft knife and a ruler so that I'm nice and straight on my cuts. Get these out of the way. So I have ruler, craft knife, and I just line it up. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut right in between these slits. So I'm going to put my point in here, slide it to here. You're going to be better off doing it a little bit short than long, because you can always cut more. But obviously once you cut, you cannot cut less. So we've got one there. One there. And essentially what that does is it makes little slits in here. So you're going to take your strap connector, you're going to put it up from the bottom. So I'm putting right sides together, and you want it to be tight, but you don't want it to pucker. Okay, so this is the wrong side of the strap connector. You can see the seam there. And I always want to come up about 1 inch in the back. Same thing here. Okay. So from here we're going to stitch, and we're going to stitch on the strap connector. So basically right in between our two top stitching lines on the strap connector, right underneath our slit, we're going to stitch right across. I'm going to stitch, back stitch, and maybe even come forward just a little bit. You don't want to put too many holes in your bag, but you really want this to stay well. You don't want it to fall apart. And do not overstitch here, and what I mean by that is you don't want to go too far where you stitch onto your bag itself. Okay, so you don't want to stitch beyond the strap connector onto your bag because you see that. So I make sure I stop all the stitchings on my strap connector. Okay, from there, cut my thread there. You want to take your, we didn't go over hardware, but we are going to use some rectangle rings. You're going to slide a rectangle ring onto your strap connector, and you're going to take the other end and put it up through the hole. Grab that from the back if I can. You want to pull it nice and tight, and then you're going to flip these down towards the bottom. Okay, and we're going to top stitch. So do that with this one. Okay, so I want to make sure that the connectors are facing towards the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is right underneath the seam, I'm just going to do a top stitch. I'm going to come forward and go back. Come forward and go back on each one. And that's just going to help hold this in place. Now, I will say one thing. If you feel like you're getting a little bit too much puckering here, which this isn't bad at all, one little trick you can do is on the back, here's my stitching line here. You can come in at an angle and just clip this tiny little lip to the stitch line. Okay, so what that does, you can see here, I just clipped, and that just kind of makes, it's kind of like a relief cut when you go around a curve, because essentially you're asking this little piece right here, this little 1/4 inch, to bend down, and without a relief cut, sometimes you don't want to do it. This sometimes depends on the thickness of your faux and the stiffness of your faux too, or your leather, whatever you're using. Just careful you don't cut your stitches. Okay, and that's going to give you a little bit of relief. So we'll go ahead and stitch. From here, we do want to put a rivet just to help hold this in place. So I'm going to measure down about 1/4 inch from the stitch line, and I'm going to make a small dot with a silver marking pen, just so I know the placement of my rivet. So I'm going to come right in the center, come down right about 1/4 inch. And then we'll use our hole punch here to punch the hole. You may have to roll your faux up just a little bit to get in there. And if you don't have rivets, or you just don't have access to them, you certainly don't have to do this. Another option is to use Chicago screws here if you don't have a rivet or a rivet press. I am using 10mm rivets here. Go ahead and, oh, didn't quite get all the way through. And then I have my rivet press over here. I'm just going to go ahead and set these rivets. and then it's completed. So we have our two sides completed. So we're going to move on to our middle. And our middle meaning front and back, we're going to need our pocket pieces. Not only the base and pocket pieces, but also the lining pieces. So let me grab my lining. And you know you have the right pieces because the lining pieces are the same width as the pocket piece. So, the place where you have the most space between your stabilizer and the top of the faux, which is going to be the opposite of where you drew your line, is where you want to stitch. So I'm going to put right sides together, the lining and the faux. Do the same thing here, make sure I got the correct orientation. Line that up, and then we're going to stitch. And the Julie is a 1/2 inch seam allowance throughout the bag, unless we're top stitching, of course. So from here we're going to open this up, and we want to top stitch on our lining. And I know it's a little odd, but that's how we're going to do this because we want to make sure that the lining does not peek through. Do not like linings that you can see from the outside of your bag. Pull it nice and tight. And then what you're going to do is take the bottoms and you're going to match them up. And when you do that, you're going to fold. Basically what's going to happen is the top of the pocket is going to fold right over that stabilizer. So you're going to see a little bit of the faux on the back, which is what you want. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and lay that down. And I'm going to now top stitch from the front. I'm going to top stitch right on my faux. So we're going to connect these, and by doing it you're going to have to pull your lining down. Make sure your sides are lined up here on the side, which they should be because they're the same size. And then we'll top stitch. Okay, you're now going to take your pocket, and you want the stabilizer on the base piece to be at the top, because basically what we have now is stabilizer for the pocket on the bottom, right? And so we have no need to have stabilizer down here because we already have it here. So we're just going to go ahead and match up the bottoms, and we're going to clip. Now, if you want a bag tag, now's a good time to put it on. and you just need to decide where you want it. I've seen some people put it here. I've seen other people put it here. I tend to put it at the bottom because as I'm reaching in and out of my pockets, I don't want to be hitting that tag and pulling it out. So I'm going to clip this on, and then I'm going to add that tag, and then we will baste these in place. So if there's one that you like better than the other, one side you think looks better, that's going to be the side you want to put your tag on. I feel like this side is a little more centered, so I'm going to mark. And, you know, as far as how far from the bottom, obviously that's personal preference. I'm going to go up about 1.5 inches and put the bottom of the bag tag 1.5 inches from the bottom of the bag, because you remember we still have a 1/2 inch seam allowance here when we sew the bottom on. So we definitely want to give ourselves enough space. So I'm going to find the center. I think I'll even measure up 2 inches, give myself a little extra space. So I'm going to mark where the bottom of that bag tag is going to go. Now everybody's bag tag is different, obviously. I have got a prong back, so I just figure out where the other side of the prong needs to go, and then I'm going to use my craft knife. I'm going to go make sure I'm just going through the front, not the pocket piece. And then just go ahead and carefully cut little slits. Make sure I get those silver marking pen marks off. Also going to make sure it's straight. So a lot of you ask me where I get my bag tags from, and you can find that on our resources page on our website. We have all kinds of things linked there for you, and it includes bag tags, my domestic sewing machine, we have an Amazon store there. We have the Sew Tape magnets, which you'll be seeing us use in just a few minutes. All kinds of good stuff. So I always like to put some double-sided tape on the back of my hardware, just like I did on those purse feet. That protects it and kind of holds it all in place. Alright, so now we're going to baste these pockets onto our main part of our bag here. And when I say baste, all I'm doing is using about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm not changing my stitch length necessarily, although typically basting is a very large stitch length. Okay, we'll do the other one. You notice when I baste, I don't worry about back stitching or anything like that. It's just to hold everything in place until I go to the next step. And now we have some really cool pockets. No lining peeking through from the front. It's time to put the sides on. So it doesn't matter where you start, which side you start with. You're going to basically make sure, first of all, that your pocket's facing in the right direction. So it needs the top of the pocket needs to be on the same side as your connectors. And we're going to clip that. going to stitch. And we're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now whenever you stitch, you always want to make sure you do not stitch on your stabilizer. And even though we have stabilizer on both this side and some on this side, I'm going to stitch from this side so that I can see the whole way down where that stabilizer is. We're going to repeat. And then we want to open these up and top stitch. Now, when you top stitch, you want automatically the front, which is where the pocket is going to want to go underneath the side. Okay, you see here how these are wanting to go in. That's perfect. That's exactly what you want. You've got more layers here than you do here, and therefore it's going to naturally want to do that. So you're just going to open that up and you're going to top stitch on your side piece, which again is this larger piece. And whenever I top stitch, I always top stitch using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So there is our first side on our front and on our back, and now we need to repeat. So we're going to start by just stitching one of these first. So I'm going to clip this side. I'm going to start on my front because I want my front to look the best, right? If we have any little glitches, we want them to be in the back. So we're going to open this up, and once again we're going to stitch on our side piece. Okay, then from here, we're going to take these last two edges and clip them and stitch. now comes probably the hardest part of this bag, and it's not hard necessarily, it's just a little tricky. We need to top stitch that seam. So of course, we're having a top stitch in the middle of all this. So we want to make sure that the seam allowance is going in the right direction, right, which is towards the side. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's correct. And you can do this one of two ways. You can start from the back and pull this all the way to the top and start stitching. So as you stitch down, it gets easier. You could stitch from the front and go in, but as you stitch, it's going to get harder. Or you can start from the top, stitch down to as far as you can go. Once you get to the point where it gets difficult, stop, turn the bag, come in from the other direction, make sure you just start and stop in the same hole and come on down. We're going to use that method today because typically I usually just kind of back the bag up and pull it through. So we're going to do this. And this bag is large enough to do this. So I'm going to start right here. And just keep coming down. I'm going to make sure everything lays nice and flat. And right here I can feel, ooh, you know, it's getting a little tight, it's getting a little difficult. So I'm not going to back stitch. All I'm going to do is take my needle out. I'm going to leave some nice long threads. I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to come in from this side, go up to where I left off. Start in that same hole that I stopped at. And then keep coming down. So now what I want to do is, because there's no back stitching, right here where these two threads come together, okay, that's basically where I stopped and started, I'm going to, from the back, go ahead and just slightly tug these threads, and then the top thread, you're going to see it's going to form a little loop, and you can pull that right through. And the thing, if it happens that you can't, it means you've basically back stitched over it and you don't have to, so it works out well. So let's see if I can get this one out. Okay, they seem to both be in there pretty good. So all I'm going to do is to secure this, I'm just going to tie these two. That will help. I'm going to cut them, and then to make sure it stays in place, I'm going to take just a tiny little piece of double-sided tape, stick it right on top of the knot, okay? And then from the inside, once we turn this back, we'll just be able to clip off these threads. I can probably do it from here. Just do a little clip. Okay, and we have the inside of the bag done. Or rather the loop done, right? It's not really totally done yet. We need to put a bottom on. So, to put the bottom on, what you want to do is first find the center of all of your sides in front and back. So I'm going to take my seams, I'm going to go ahead and match them up, the front and the back seams. So this is basically where the pocket was added on. And then go ahead and mark my sides. So I'm just going to put a little snip here. Do the same thing here. And I'm going to turn it this way, match my snips, and then go ahead and mark the front and the back. Also on my bottom, I'm going to do the same thing. You want to fold it in half this way. Go ahead and mark the center of your long edges, which I did when I put my feet on. And then you're also going to fold it this way and find the center of your sides. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get rid of some of this bulk. So obviously we have about 3 pieces of faux leather here, plus a pocket. And so this can be an area where there is some issues with bulk. So I'm just going to take and kind of cut this out at an angle just to help. So when I stitch, I won't have quite as much bulk there. And if you're using a cotton canvas or something, you may not have to do this. But it's always good to reduce bulk. Okay, now here is the key to this bag. You're going to want to put your bottom in with the long side on this long side. If you do that, it's going to be wrong because your pockets are going to be on the side. So what you need to do is make sure that your pocket is on the front and the back, and put the long side against the pocket. Okay, once you do that, when you stitch this bottom on, you're going to stitch from the edge of your stabilizer to the other edge of your stabilizer. Do not stitch all the way to the edge of the bottom. Okay? Because if you do, you're gonna have some problems. So I'm going to start and stop right here. So you can see it's about a 1/2 inch from the edge of the bottom. And stitch all the way until I get to the stabilizer here, and I'm going to do a little back stitch and I'm going to stop right there. We're just going to worry about this one side first. Make sure everything is lined up. So I'm going to go ahead and put my needle in right there at the edge of the stabilizer. Okay. So you can see I'm approaching my stabilizer. I'm going to just stitch to that point and then do a tiny little back stitch. So you can see I can pull this up. I just stitched to that point. So we're going to clip the other side, the other long side first before we do the sides. And we're going to repeat. Okay, so here's what we have, and now we need to do the sides. In order to get this main part of the bag to turn, you need to make a relief cut. You can't just expect the material to turn and not have some kind of little pucker here, because you're asking it to do something you don't want to do. So where you're going to make your relief cut is, you're going to find, and I'm going to mark this with a pen so you can see it a little bit better. You have basically my stitches end right here. Okay, so what has happened is I have, of course, stitched down, and when I got to the end of the stabilizer, I stopped. I want to cut the main part of the bag, not the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to move this bottom piece out of the way. Just the main part of the bag I want to cut, and I'm just going to come straight down like this and do a cut. And I'm going to do that on all 4 of the corners. Okay, so I'm just going to stick my scissors in. You want to cut up to your stitch line. So snip. Just like that. So now you can see that these are all snipped. But you can see my bottom underneath. My bottom's not been cut. So from here, all I'm going to do is take the center of my bottom where I made my mark, a little notch. I'm going to take the center of the side where I made my notch. I'm going to connect those notches. And when I do, you will see that that relief cut's going to form like a little right angle, and it's going to allow me to stitch right across the bottom of this bag. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, and you can see that cut there. So what I want to do is when I stitch this, I'm going to stitch with the bag facing up. I'm just going to kind of push this bag down, and I'm going to start right where I left off, and I'm going to stitch right across to the other side. Okay, I'm going to take this side and do the same thing. Clip that a little better. So I'm just going to push this down, and then I'm going to stitch. Okay, the last thing we want to do before we turn this bag is to cut back these seam allowances. So I usually cut them to about 1/4 of an inch. You obviously have a lot more bulk here in the center because this is where your pocket intersects. Clippings, and we can now turn our bag. So usually like to try to get these ends in first. Make sure these corners are nice. Okay, and there is our Julie. Now what you can do is, sometimes a lot of times I do this, I'll go to my iron and I'll actually just take I have a small iron and I'll stick it in here and I'll go through and I'll press this at this point. Press it here, you know, go through and just kind of press all this and make sure everything's nice and unwrinkled, because we certainly don't want wrinkled bags. Let's just go ahead and pinch my seams. But the good thing about this faux, I mean, the Julie's a great bag, but this faux kind of like makes the bag stand out on itself. It's so pretty. And by using that layout chart, you're going to get this exact look with it. All right, we are going to move on to our zipper placket. And the first thing we want to do with our zipper placket is you need to take your zipper and take it apart just slightly. You're going to basically fold it on itself, pinch it down, and then take that pinch and using a right angle, put it up towards the teeth and create that little, this is like the only place I use pins. We want to make sure the other side is even, so you're going to fold it down and then take that fold and put it up towards your teeth. And if you need to adjust it slightly, you can do that. You want this to be as close as possible to even. Okay, and now we're going to stitch. Now whenever I stitch this, I always stitch with the rest of the zipper tape going to the back of the machine. So I'm just going to, of course I don't want to stitch on my pin, try to stitch over it. And all I'm doing is stitching in the seam allowance area of the zipper. So I know we have white on white here, but basically what I'm doing is I am just stitching right here along the edge to hold this right angle part down. Just right there. And then once that is done, this is what you should look like. Now my zipper is a little longer than it needs to be right now, but that's fine. I'll just go ahead and clip off the rest of it when I'm done putting this zipper placket together, or even once I get almost to the end of finishing the bag. And then I'll be able to just save the zipper for the rest of something else. Okay, here are zipper placket pieces. And what I usually do is just kind of line them all up. And I use some 1/2-inch double-sided tape here and just put the tape all along the edges, the short edges. Okay, let me just flip these apart. All right, on one of your main pieces, you're going to fold back both edges a 1/2 inch. And if you want to mark 1 inch down and fold the short edge to the 1 inch mark, you can do that. I usually just use the edge of my 1/2 inch tape as a guide. And also I can see on my measuring tape here on my machine, that's a 1/2 inch. And if they're not exactly a 1/2 inch, it's okay. I just want it to be about. Okay, then I'm going to take the other main piece and I'm going to fold over one edge. I'm going to take each lining piece and I'm going to fold over one edge. Again, I'm folding all of these over a 1/2 inch. Okay, then we're going to flip all these over, and we're going to use, I like to use 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape here. You don't have to use double-sided tape on this part. You can certainly just wonder clip your zipper to your pieces. I feel like it all, just holds everything in place a little bit better. So I'm going to start with the main piece that I folded both edges back on. I'm going to put double-sided tape, 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape on one side here. Actually, I'll go ahead and put it all on. When you go to put it on the pieces that don't have both sides folded in, don't go all the way to the edge on the side that's not folded in. Go ahead and leave yourself a little bit of space there. You see, because I know I'm going to have to fold this side in, so the double-sided tape isn't quite going all the way to the edge. It's about 1 inch away. Do the same thing on the lining. Now the lining I'm using for this bag is the Tilda Chambray Brown that we have in stock. I think it's a great pairing. And then of course I'm using nickel hardware and the nickel and white number 5 zipper tape. And everything is linked below, including this amazing brown and white croc, which we just got back in stock. Okay, so starting with the piece that I folded both edges back on, I'm going to go ahead and remove the backing from the tape. You want to take your zipper. The one edge, okay, so this essentially is the raw edge of the zipper. You're going to take that and place the right angle just underneath this fold. Okay, we have a lot of bulk here, especially when you add a zipper and then you add the lining. So I'm going to come down about 1/4 of an inch and I'm going to put the edge of that fold, the right angle, about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Okay, you see that there? And then all you have to do is take the rest of your zipper and lay it down so that the edges meet. And do not pull your zipper as you lay it down. This is where I think sometimes wavy zippers come in. I'm just going to lie it down, let it do its thing. Okay, make sure it's in place. Then we're going to take one of our lining pieces. Let's remove the backing from the tape. And we're going to line up these 2 short edges that are folded. Okay, so you see that lines up perfectly there. We're going to go ahead and lay the rest of this down. And when we get to this other side, we're going to remove the backing from this side and then fold this up so that it's even with the main zipper placket here. Okay? So that's how we can ensure, because if we were to fold all of these and then we go to line them up, they may not be exactly perfect, and a lot of times they're not. It's just kind of part of the deal. So I like to just fold it as I go, and that way I know it's exactly aligned. Now, this might be more than a 1/2 inch, this might be less than a 1/2 inch, or it might be a 1/2 inch. Doesn't matter what it is at this point, as long as these edges are even, that's what you're looking for. Another thing is I always like to stitch my zipper plackets with the wrong side of the zipper facing up. So essentially I'm stitching on the lining side, and I'm always going to stitch 1/4 inch from this edge. If you need to use your edge guide here, do it, because this is going to be on the top of your bag and you really want it to look nice. You don't want to have any problems with it looking bad, obviously. All right. I'm going to take my time. Make sure I'm doing 1/4 inch. So now I'm going to clip off this extra zipper tape here. And if you buy zipper from us, you obviously have nylon tape, so you can cut it. I'm going to just kind of burn the edge of the zipper, make sure it doesn't fray. And then we're going to open this up. So we're going to put wrong sides together now. And we're going to wonder clip. Now we are going to top stitch this eventually, but I don't want to do it yet. And the reason why is because when I go to stitch my other side on, I really want these two sides to be the same distance from the zipper teeth. And so if I end up stitching one side a little closer than the other, I can adjust one side or the other without having to unpick the top stitching. Because once you top stitch, pretty much that's it, right? Can't take the holes out once you put them in. Okay, so now we're going to take our other main placket piece. We're going to go ahead and place it. Same type of thing, about 1/4 inch, but our main goal here now is to make sure that all of these short edges line up. So I'm going to line that up first with the existing short edge, and then kind of line it up with the zipper. Okay, again, we're just going to lay our zipper down. Make sure these edges are nice and even. And now we want to fold this edge back so it's even. So I'm just going to remove the backing from the tape and fold it over so that it is even with the existing side of the zipper placket, the other side. And then we're just going to repeat for the lining. Okay, so once again I'm going to stitch with the wrong side of the zipper facing up. I'm going to stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. ahead and clip off your zipper tape. A little lighter over that. I'm going to open this up. Now I like to keep my zippers attached here because then I can really pull and see how far away I am from the teeth. I think sometimes people want to pull the zippers apart to do this, and I really like to keep mine together. Okay, so I'm going to kind of take a look and make sure it all looks good. And now we're going to top stitch. So when we top stitch, I always start here, like on a raw edge, so that I can back stitch. I'm going to come up to this point, turn, stitch 1/8 of an inch down, turn, stitch 1/8 of an inch to close the side, and then we're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch. So basically we're using 1/8 of an inch all the way around. I do like to do some hand cranks I should say, on my machine in certain areas because of the bulk. Another thing too is that if you have a walking foot machine, you may have to use a piece of material or fabric in certain areas so that your walking foot does not drag and ruin your faux. Sometimes that can happen. So I have a little piece of kind of scrap thing here that I'll use when we get to that point. So you'll see where I do my hand cranks. I'm just going to start right here. And do a couple stitches, stitch, and then stitch to the end. Or 1/8 of an inch from the end, let's say. And come one more stitch. And this is where you want to be picky. This is the top of your bag. So we're going to turn. And you can see here, my foot is up in the air. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's not going to go down all the way down to the bottom of the machine. That's just kind of part of it. This is where you have thickness and where I'm going to do some hand cranks. So I'm just going to let the machine pull it through naturally. But I'm going to hand crank it through that bulk. Once I get to the other side of the bulk, I am going to put this in just to make sure that that doesn't drag anymore, and then I'll stitch. And as I stitch, I'm pulling the zipper teeth away from the faux to make sure that this is nice and tight here, nice and flat. So I'm approaching a really bulky area again. I'm going to stitch till I'm about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. I'm going to turn. I'm going to do some hand cranks. I'm just going to hand crank to the end. I'm almost there. And then we'll turn and we will stitch. Okay, and you can see how nice and flat this is now. And of course, we got to do this side. A couple weeks ago, I was teaching in Chattanooga, and we were making birchins, and they did their zipper plackets, and I told them to do that, to go ahead and hand crank when they got to that bulk. And they were amazed at how much better their zipper plackets turned out. So if yours have a hard time with zipper plackets, and you feel like, you know, they just don't come out that great, especially on those ends, try to hand crank. And I think you're going to see a really big difference. Okay, so I'm at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and hand crank. And then I'm going to protect my faux or leather, whatever it is you're using. Turn, go ahead and hand crank. This is just going to help you get nice even stitches. And just like that, our zipper placket is completed. So we're going to pull it apart. We're going to mark the center. And then we're going to set it aside for a later step. All right, we're moving right along. We're going to start on our lining. And I'm going to start by working on the pockets. So we have our two slip pockets here. We have a little one and we have a big one, and we have our zipper pocket. So typically when I'm not filming, I actually go to my domestic machine to stitch all of these pieces together. For ease of filming, we're going to stay right here and we're going to stitch. This machine is an industrial machine, does not love cotton by itself, but I can usually manage to make it work. So what I have done here is I have taken my zipper, put the wrong side of the zipper against the right side of the pocket, and stitched it on. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up. I'm going to make sure my zipper tape is laying flat. So that means that the zipper or the seam allowance is going towards the zipper pocket. Okay, so you can see if you did it this way with this seam going towards the teeth, that's incorrect. You want to make sure that the seam is going opposite the teeth. And you're going to top stitch that down. We're going to repeat. So we're going to take the wrong side of the zipper, put it against the right side of the pocket. you want to make sure your pockets here on the side are matched up. And we're going to stitch. I think I might be running out of bobbin. Let me see. I'm getting close. Let me do a little up here. I always make an extra one, or at least I try to remember to make an extra one. Okay, so we're going to stitch this in place. And then we are going to open this up. Again, make sure our zipper tape is laying flat, so the seam allowance is going towards the pocket, not the teeth. And we're going to top stitch. Okay, we'll set that aside for just a second. We're going to take our large slip pocket. We're going to put right sides together. And we're going to stitch down each side. And you can use a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. I typically use about 1/4. Either way, doesn't matter. As long as your pocket's sewn together, you're good to go. And I usually do start from the top on both sides. I just flip it over, as you just saw. Alright, we're going to repeat that for the small slip pocket. So we're going to take and we're going to fold the shorter edges so that they're, or the longer edges, I guess, in half, so the shorter edges meet. We're going to stitch. To turn these pockets, what you want to do is fold the seam allowance right along the stitch line. Go ahead and put your thumb and finger in and just poke that out, and you get almost a perfect corner without having to cut anything. I love my point turner. We do sell these in the shop. I like to just kind of stick that all in there, and then you can see that makes a perfect corner. So we're going to do the same thing here, just by folding that seam allowance down. Good on your corners. At this point I would typically go and press this, but I'm just going to stitch across the top here. That makes it a little easier when we put our accent piece on. It holds it all together. So I'm going to repeat for this big pocket. kind of finger press that seam out and then stitch across the top. Okay, we're going to take our slip pocket accent pieces, and we of course have one for our smaller pocket and we have one for our larger pocket. I put double-sided tape on the top and the bottom edge. You're going to pull the backing off the tape, and you're going to roughly center this pocket piece in there. And what you want to happen is when you fold this over, you want these two edges to meet here at the bottom. And that's how you know you're nice and even. Okay, we're going to repeat on the larger one. Now, I will give you a tip here. If you are unsure as to, or you're having a hard time getting that to meet up, what you can do is draw a line down the center of your accent piece. These accent pieces are 1 inch wide. I mean, they're 1 inch tall. What am I trying to say? And you can see they're nice dark blue. When you line your pocket up, you're lining it up just below that line. Okay, so the top of the pocket, first of all, you want your top of your pocket to be nice and even. So if it is off a little bit, go ahead and trim it. Let's see, mine needs a little trimming. And then when I put this pocket piece on, I'm going to put it just under that line. Okay, so you can see the line, I think, all the way across there. I'm just going to fold this over. And then we're going to top stitch it on. Whoops, broke a needle. So I buy my needles by the hundreds, literally. And I get them from a company called Diamond Needle Company, Diamond Needle Corp. And we have it on our resource page on our website. And they have the organ needles, which I really like organ. Of course, you can buy different tips for each needle. And I like the tip that gives me a nice straight stitch. So I recommend you check them out. They've got really great fast shipping. You can get 100 needles for not a lot of money. And if you sew like I do, you're sewing a lot and you go through needles quite a bit. Let's go ahead and top stitch this one. And then we're just going to cut off our little edges here. And we have our 2 slip pockets done. So we are going to continue on with our zipper pocket. Let's get that on. So when you're starting to work with your lining pieces, the first thing you want to do is fold them in half and find the center, which I've already done. So literally all I do is fold in half, mark the center. I give you a measurement as to how far down to put your zipper overlay. And all I do is put double-sided tape on the back of this, stick it on, make sure it's nice and centered. From here, we're going to stitch around the outside of this rectangle. I'm using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance here. Come half a stitch closer here. And now that we're dealing with lining and you know, zipper plackets, you really want to pay attention and go slow and make sure your stitch quality is really good, because this is what people are going to see. So I did not back stitch here. What I'm going to do is pull my threads through to the back, and then I will tie them off so that you don't see any back stitching on the zipper placket or zipper overlay. And make sure I stop in the same hole I started. Go ahead and pull this through, tie it off. And then I do like to put a little piece of double-sided tape, as I mentioned earlier, just to hold that knot. Okay, from here we're going to cut the center out of this zipper opening. Now, there's no reason to try to get this lining exactly matched up with your zipper placket. The idea here is that you don't want to see the lining peeking through. So typically what I do is I make sure that my tip of my scissors is underneath my zipper overlay, cut all the way as far as I can. When I turn this over, I just stick the tip of my scissors over to the double-sided tape, and then I fold this back and cut. And you can see some of the overlay here, and that's okay. It does not need to be neat and pretty and tidy here. This is not something people are going to see. People will see the outside, but not the inside. Just make sure you do not touch your zipper overlay, and you will be good to go. Okay, so from the back, this is what I have, and then from the front, let's see how nice it looks. So from here we need to go ahead and install one of our zipper pulls onto our zipper. And you know, everybody's got different ways of doing that. I have my little makeshift holder here, zipper holder, which I absolutely love. I am going to burn the edge of my zipper just so that I can get rid of any little threads that are sticking out. And then whenever you use any kind of holder like this or whatever you may have, the key is to come in at a 45-degree angle. So I'm just going to come in this way, hit it at the same time. And if I'm off a tooth or two, I can just pull it back out, adjust accordingly. And zipper is installed. So go ahead and put some double-sided tape on your zipper tape. You can either use 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch here. I see I have 1/8 of an inch handy, so I'm just going to put it right on the edge of the zipper tape. And what we're going to do is pull the backing off this and then center the zipper in the opening that we just made. But I'm going to tell you, before we even do that, our second slip pocket goes underneath here. And in the past, I may or may have not accidentally stitched my pocket to my zipper pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and place this on now and stitch it in place. So you want to come down about a 1/2 inch from the bottom of your zipper placket, and you want to center it. And you can certainly measure this. This is where my Sew Tight magnets come in. I'm going to go ahead and just magnet this in place. And you can find under our resources page on our website a link with a coupon code for these magnets. So I'm going to stitch, and this is a small pocket, so I'm not going to make any dividers or openings. I'm just going to stitch all the way around. Okay, let's remove these. And if you would like, you can put rivets here in the corner of this pocket. I like to put rivets on my pockets because I feel like it's a point of pressure. We're going in and out of our pockets a lot, and I certainly don't want that stitching to come out. So I'm just going to roll my lining. Go ahead and punch a hole here. Punch a hole here. And then I also keep little pieces of Decoville Heavy, and I will use them on the back of my lining. So I'm going to punch little holes. And then usually these are usually they're 6 or 8 millimeter rivets that I use here. So the piece of Decoville just goes here on the back because the lining's thin and we don't want that to pull through. Okay, I'll set those rivets. Have my rivet press handy dandy here outside of camera view, and we have those set. So now what we want to do is pull the backing off of the tape, and let's go ahead and center the zipper in the opening. Now I like my zippers closing to the left, but you choose however you would like. And what I want to make sure of is that I have enough to close my pocket on either side here. Okay, that looks pretty good. So we're going to stitch around the inside of this rectangle. So the smaller rectangle now. And I'm not going to back stitch, same as before. I'm going to tie them off. You may have to move your zipper pull out of the way. Make sure that I stop in the same hole I started. Go ahead and tie this off. Now, because the knot is going to be on the inside of my pocket, I'm not going to want to use double-sided tape here. This is the only place I usually burn my threads. I'm just going to make a knot. Usually tie it at least 3 times. Pull it nice and tight. And then you're going to take your upper pocket and fold it towards your lower pocket. Now, whenever you use this method, you're always going to have about 1.25 inches left on your bottom pocket here that you're going to have to cut off, unless you cut your pockets different sizes. I don't think it's worth worrying about doing that in the beginning when it's just as easy to cut it off at this point. So I'm going to cut that off. And we're going to leave the bottom of this pocket open so that we can close the bottom of our bag. So turn this over, pull the side over, and go ahead and stitch. We're going to repeat on the other side. Make sure you back stitch really well at the bottom because that's going to have a lot of pressure when we go to close this bag. Some extra here on this side. I can go ahead and cut that off. Throwing my lighter around. Just burn these. Right. So there we have one side of our lining. So we're going to take the other side and we're going to, again, find the center if you haven't done that already. You're going to take your larger slip pocket. We're going to give you a measurement as to how far to come down. We're going to center it. And then go ahead and stitch this on. Now, if you want to divide this pocket into, half, you want to add a pen pocket, whatever it may be, you can certainly do that. I really love to have a pen with me at all times. It sure seems like I need it, even in the age of cell phones. So I'm going to measure over 2 inches from one of these edges, and I'm going to mark it with a disappearing airline sew erase pen. So I'm going to come over, I'm going to move my magnet here. I'm going to come over 2 inches. To me, that's a pretty good, you could go 1.5 inches, but this pocket's big enough. I'm going to do 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line. And it doesn't have to be a real heavy line, just as long as you can see it. We're going to go ahead and stitch. So you're going to start up here in this corner, you're going to come down, go over. I like to come up, go over 1 stitch and come back down. It gives me a spot for a rivet here without cutting through my stitching. And then we're going to turn and come back up the other side. So start over here. Let me make sure my magnet is good and tight. And stitch. Add my tag, my inside tag in. We'll turn. So when I approach this line, I'm going to stop, I'm going to turn again. Get my magnet out of the way. This thing is just determined to be in my way. I'm going to move it. We're going to come up. I'm going to come over 1 stitch. And I'm just going to hand crank that one. And we're going to turn and come back down. I do usually like to make sure my bottom stitches are lined up here. Turn, take this magnet off, and cross. And then we're going to come back up this side. From here, again, I like to put some rivets, so I'm going to go ahead and punch holes for that. And I am going to punch one here. So here, I don't know if you can see, I've got like a little space because I came over 1 stitch. I'm going to stitch right in the, or punch a hole right in the middle of those stitches. So that will help. And then of course I'm going to use some Decoville once again to reinforce the back. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut some holes. Go ahead and use some rivets. We've got one more here. And then we'll go ahead and set these rivets. Bring this over so you can see how this is done. Just go ahead and super easy. All right, I'm gonna leave that there for just a second because we now have our key fob. And the key fob is just a piece that I put double-sided tape down one side. And I'm just going to peel that off. I'm going to fold it in half. And these edges don't need to be exact. We are going to trim. So there is a trim allowance included in these key fob pieces whenever you use the Simply Classic pattern. What we'll do is stitch 1/4 inch away from this raw edge. And then what I will typically do is go to my cutting table and cut this down to 1/8 of an inch. We're going to improvise today, and I'm going to cut it here. I've got some threads that misbehaved. Go ahead and get those off. So I'm just going to use my craft knife today to cut this back. And then I'm going to put a 1/2 inch swivel clasp. Looks like I didn't quite make it through to the end. Let's go ahead and do that. So I usually just slip this on the edge here. Oops, got to put it on the right way. Fold this over and then punch a hole and place a rivet. Now you can certainly stitch this instead of riveting. That is not a problem. Whatever you have, go ahead and use. So we'll pull this back over. Go ahead and there is our key fob. All right, so now what we need to do is to go ahead and put all of this together. So we're going to take our 2 lining pieces. We're going to take our zipper placket pieces, and we are going to take our upper lining pieces. I'm going to get all this tidied up. So I always like to start with my side that has the zipper on it because I want my zippers to pull in the same direction, whatever direction that is. So because this is closing in this direction, I'm going to make sure that this zipper closes in that direction as well. I already have the center marked. I'm going to go ahead and match it up with the center of the lining, and we're going to clip. Because this piece is on here, we know that the other piece goes on the other side. So we'll go ahead and clip that. Okay, you can go ahead and baste those on. And when I say baste, I just mean use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to get it stitched in place. So there's one. And before I stitch this one on, I want to get my key fob which doesn't want to stay in my hand, stitched on as well. I always like to put my key fob on the side where my zipper opens because I don't want to have to open my entire bag to get my keys out. So I like to just slip that right underneath the upper lining, and then we'll baste all that in place. Okay, so now that that's basted in place, we need to go ahead and put our upper linings on. So I'm going to just grab that upper lining. Should be the exact same size as your lining piece. You can go ahead and clip it in place. Get the other one, go on the floor. And we're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. Once those are stitched in place, all you want to do is flip these upper lining pieces up. So you want to leave the seam allowance going towards where it is, up towards the top, and you're just going to flip this up, keeping that seam allowance behind. Go ahead and just kind of finger press that out, and then we're going to top stitch on the upper lining, catching the seam allowance up behind it. Now, if you have a walking foot machine, right where your upper lining intersects your zipper placket, you've got some bulk. That's where your foot might have a tendency to drag. So usually when I get to that point, I just go ahead and protect my project. Just in case. Better be safe than sorry. Okay, so there's one side done. Let's go ahead and top stitch this other side. So again, we're going to leave the seam allowance going towards the top. Go ahead and fold this over and stitch. protect my project. Okay, we have lining pieces completed. So I'm just going to clip my zipper out of the way here. Make sure I don't accidentally stitch on it. And again, your zipper probably won't be this long. It just happens to be a piece I had. And I'll just clip it to the right length when I'm done. So we're going to take these two pieces, we're going to put them right sides together. And the most important place where you want this to match is right where your upper linings intersect. So go ahead and make sure that that is exactly correct right there. I'm going to put a clip. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I want to make sure that those upper lining pieces match exactly right. Okay, and then I can go ahead and clip the rest of the bag together. Now don't worry about the bottom yet. We're worried about these sides. I'm going to stitch those first, and we will stitch the bottom after we put the bag together. Now, because these are our points, our intersecting points are the points that we want to make sure match really well, that's where I'm going to put my needle in first. So there's nothing that says you have to start at the top or you have to start at the bottom. You can start anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and put my needle in here. Once I do that, I know that that is not going to, no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to get to these two pieces apart. So I know that that's going to match up perfectly. So I'm going to do that at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to make sure they're nice and lined up. I'm going to put my needle in. And now, it doesn't matter what happens here, how this shifts, that's staying together. I'm going to back stitch up to the top. Turn around, come back down. And then once I get past through where this upper lining is, I'm going to start taking a larger seam allowance. This is to help us prevent having a baggy lining. We certainly don't want that. And as I increase, I mean, I'm going to go up to, 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch. We're going to do the same thing on this side, and I'm going to flip this over so I can start from the top again. Start right where this intersecting upper linings are. Put it in a 1/2 inch. Go ahead and go backwards. Once I get past my upper lining, go ahead and increase my seam allowance. Okay, from here, we want to cut back these seam allowances, but we do not want to cut them back up here at the top. We want to keep, as we stitch, we want these seam allowances to be open, and if we cut them back too much, we're not going to be able to open them. So what you want to do is just kind of cut this back. I go just past the upper lining, the bulk of it, and then once I get past that, I just veer off. And do the same thing on this side. And you see here, we've got our lining looking really great. So now it's time to put the bag together. It's always exciting. If you happen to want your zipper pocket on the inside to be, on the front or the back, or if you have a specific way you like your bags, make sure that you, put this in correctly. I'm going to slide this in. And because we took a larger seam allowance on our lining, it's going to be tight. All my pieces and parts are in there. Go ahead and pull this out. Now, probably should have done this before, but I'm going to match up these seams and go ahead and mark the side of my bag because I want the side to match up with the side seam. And since there's no seam here, we need to mark that. So let me mark both sides here. And again, you probably want to do this before you slide your interior and your exterior together. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and match up the sides first. And then we're going to go ahead and clip the rest of the bag. So let me stick this here. I think you can see this. Big bag. And in the beginning when I talked about there's no intersecting seams, what I meant by that is, of course, our side seam for our interior is on the side, but our seams for the exterior are here on the front because of where our pockets are. So that's what makes it nice as far as not having a lot of bulk at the top of the bag. And you can put as many or as few clips here as you need. And then when you stitch, you want to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you want to make sure you do not stitch on your stabilizer. So if you have to stitch a little less than a 1/2 inch, that's fine. It's whatever works. Whenever I stitch, I actually like to stay about, just a hair. No, don't go right up against your stabilizer. Give yourself just like a little bit, just a couple of, let's say like 1 millimeter, maybe not even quite 1/8 of an inch over. Okay. So we're going to stitch, and I like to stitch this from the inside of the bag. So all I'm going to do is pull this over. Clips out of the way here. There we go. And then we're going to stitch. And then I just kind of pick up this bag and I roll it towards me. Okay, because you always want a straight line ahead of you as you're stitching. So just roll to get that section of straight line. So you see I'm starting to get curved here, so I want to go ahead and adjust the bag again. Flat. Roll some more. So we have that completed, and you do not want to cut back your seam allowances, okay? Go ahead and leave them long. It makes it a little easier, I think, to top stitch when you have that nice big thick section to top stitch on. All we're going to do is pull the lining up over the bag. Okay, so from here, go ahead and push the lining inside. Just kind of working this faux so that it can be nice and even along the top. I'm going to make sure that the inside looks like it's going to be good, which it does. And then typically from here I would top stitch first, but I want to top stitch on my cylinder arm. So what I'm going to do is finish closing up this bag before I top stitch so I can keep it here at this machine. So I'm going to open up the zipper pocket, okay? I'm going to pull the zipper pocket lining out. I'm going to reach inside that pocket, grab the bottom of the bag, so I'm grabbing the two lining pieces, and I'm going to pull them out of the pocket. Make sure your key fob doesn't sneak out like mine wants to. And you can see the bottom of your bag here. So go ahead and clip that in place, wonder clip it. And we're going to stitch using a generous 1/2 inch seam allowance here. Go ahead and cut the seam allowance back. And then we're going to box our corners. So to box our corners, we're going to come to these little sections that we had cut out. We're going to open them up so that the two seams match. Because both seams have been cut back, I nest the seams. And what that means is one seam goes in one direction, the other seam goes in the other direction, and you just fit those two together. And we're going to stitch this using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We'll box our other corner. Make sure your bottom seam is going in the same direction. So it's going in that direction, so I'm going to make sure it does the same thing here when I nest these two seams together. Alright, so we're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, as I said. can go ahead and trim the seam allowance. And I trim it back to about 1/4 of an inch. We'll go ahead and stitch the other corner. And we can go ahead and push this all back inside the bag now. Okay, and then we're going to take the pocket, we're going to turn it under about 1/2 inch. And we're going to close this pocket by top stitching it. Okay, so let's go ahead and top stitch that. You can push your pocket back inside your bag. Poke those corners down in there really good. Okay, zip our pocket. And then I'm going to go back and put a few wonder clips on the top of this bag. We are going to move over to the cylinder arm machine. Now this bag is large enough to top stitch here on this machine, but I like top stitching on the cylinder arm. I have it, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, and look at how good that looks. And look at how nice and tight that lining is. There's no baggy lining in there. It looks great. So as far as top stitching is concerned, you know, the main thing you want to do is just make sure you don't start here in the front. So I'm going to come to the side and start. Basically where you see me pulling or using two hands here is when I'm going over seams. Really want to make sure that it feeds through nice and even. So I'm going to make sure that I end up in my same hole. I'm going to do one little back stitch once I get there. You don't have to back stitch a long way. It just needs to be enough to hold it in place. And cut my threads. And then we have a beautifully top stitch bag. So the last few things that we need to do are put our handles on. We need to put our zipper, our final zipper, and our zipper pull on. So we will quickly do that. So I'll unclip my zipper. And pull my tails out and clean up these edges so that it'll feed through nicely. If your zipper did not match up perfectly on the other side when you stitched your zipper placket together, now's the time to cheat it. What I mean by that is if you're off 1 or 2 teeth, you can certainly misfeed it 1 or 2 teeth here, and then it'll kind of help match up on the other side. So I certainly do not want my zipper to be that long, so I'm going to cut it back . And then the trick I use to get the zipper end on is I fold the zipper tape over and over again. I'll go ahead and put a clip down here. And then I burn all of these edges together. So that they stay nice and tight together. Take your zipper end, slide it on, once it's on, go ahead and take your screw and screw it in. Now you do want to use Loctite on your screws. I'm not going to do it right now just because we're filming, but I typically put just a tiny little dab of it on there, and it just helps everything stay in place. So then you can unclip and have your zipper end there. And then the last thing is our handles. So to put your handles on, I obviously want to go ahead and use rivets to do so. Your handles should be the same length, and you can double check that. And if you know that they are, then you can punch one set of holes, and then you can go ahead and punch your second set by using one handle as a guide. So I usually come down and you can certainly experiment with this some. You can fold this over more than an inch, and you can put 2 rivets. You can certainly do a lot of different things here. I'm going to fold it over about an inch and punch a hole 4 rivets. So I tend to only punch 1 hole at a time because I find that if I punch 2, it tends to get off somehow. The second hole it skews, and it's less than perfect as far as being centered. So I go ahead and punch that first. You can use a silver marking pen, or what I like to do is just kind of put a little indent in there, see where it is, which I cannot see, so let me try it again. Okay, then I'm just going to fold this in half punch the second set on the other side. And then you can go ahead and set your rivets. Make sure your handle is not twisted when you do this. Okay, so I will set those rivets just a minute. And then we're going to repeat for the other handle. And the main thing you want to make sure of is that your handles are the same length. So I'm going to go ahead and, of course, I give you measurements in the pattern for this. I just kind of winging it here. So for this side, because this is the second side and I want to make sure my handles are the same length, I'm going to set one here. And then I can adjust if need be. So I'll punch my second hole here. Slide it in. Make sure they're the same length. Oops. That's what happens when you don't set your rivets right away. Pop out. Okay, so that feels good. I will set the rivets and it will be complete. There we have our Julie. And again, if you'd like to get the layout to make this exact bag with the same layout in the croc, we certainly have that where you can download it. It makes a gorgeous bag, beautiful for spring and summer. We hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and until next time everybody, happy sewing.